The night air was cool, carrying a faint scent of jet fuel and the distant hum of engines. Outside the terminal, travelers huddled in jackets, their breath visible in the crisp darkness, each person lost in their own thoughts as they prepared to leave one city behind for another. At gate B12, the fluorescent lights cast a gentle glow over the empty rows of seats, the quiet punctuated only by the occasional rolling suitcase or the soft murmur of late-night conversations. It was just after 10 o'clock, the hour when the airport seemed to slow down, the energy shifting from the rush of the day to the calm of the night shift. On this particular Friday, the 18th of July, 2025, the departure board glowed with the promise of new destinations, while passengers double-checked their phones confirming the date and time, making sure nothing had changed. The final call for Flight 417 to Denver echoed through the terminal, a familiar announcement that sent a ripple of movement through the waiting crowd. Some passengers hurriedly gathered their belongings, while others took a last, lingering look at the terminal around them. Families, business travelers, and solo adventurers shuffled down the jet bridge, their faces a blend of tiredness, excitement, and quiet anticipation. For some, it was a routine trip. For others, perhaps, a journey that marked a new chapter. Inside the aircraft, the cabin lights glowed with a soft, welcoming warmth, casting gentle shadows and creating a sense of comfort amid the unfamiliarity of travel. Molly, a flight attendant with 10 years of experience, stood at the door greeting each passenger with a practiced but genuine smile. Her uniform was crisp, her demeanor calm, and her eyes attentive to every detail. She helped her mother with a stroller, gently folding it and reassuring the young woman that everything would be taken care of, her voice soothing over the baby's soft cries. She pointed an elderly man toward his seat, offering a steady arm and a kind word, making sure he felt comfortable and at ease in the bustling cabin. Around her, passengers stowed their bags in the overhead bins, buckled their seatbelts and settled in, some with practiced efficiency, others with a hint of nervousness or wonder. The pre-flight safety demonstration began, a familiar ritual for frequent flyers, but a moment of curiosity for first-timers. The flight attendants moved through the motions with precision, their voices calm and reassuring as they pointed out exits and demonstrated life vests. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady and confident, announcing their flight time, expected weather, and wishing everyone a pleasant journey. For a brief moment, the entire cabin listened, united by the shared experience of departure. The plane pushed back from the gate, engines humming to life, as the airport lights outside the windows blurred into streaks of gold and blue. The world outside seemed to fade away, replaced by the cocoon of the aircraft. Molly walked the aisle one last time, checking that all was secure, seatbelts fastened, tray tables up, bags tucked safely away. She offered a reassuring nod to a nervous passenger, her presence a quiet comfort. With a surge of power, Flight 417 lifted off into the night sky, the city below shrinking to a patchwork of twinkling lights. The gentle vibration of ascent filled the cabin, signaling the start of the journey. The fastened seatbelt sign chimed off, and a hush settled over the cabin. Passengers adjusted their seats, pulled out books, headphones, or simply closed their eyes, letting the gentle hum of the engines lull them into relaxation. For Molly and the crew, it was the start of the quiet hours, routine service, quiet observation, and the subtle choreography of night flight. Everything felt completely normal, as if nothing could disturb the peace of this routine departure. As the plane leveled at 35,000 feet, a hush settled over the cabin, the kind of quiet that only comes when the world outside is nothing but endless darkness and the hum of engines. The overhead lights glowed softly, casting a pale sheen over rows of drowsy faces. Molly began the drink service, her cart rattling gently as she moved down the aisle, offering comfort in the form of tea, coffee, and tiny bottles of wine. Most passengers mumbled sleepy requests, barely lifting their heads, their voices muffled by exhaustion and the late hour. But in row 15, a man and woman sat perfectly still, eyes fixed ahead, their faces expressionless, as if they were waiting for something only they could sense. Molly offered them drinks, no response, not even a blink. It was as if her presence didn't register at all, as if she were invisible to them. She noticed their ears. No headphones, no devices, nothing to distract or occupy them. They weren't reading, sleeping, or watching the in-flight entertainment. They just sat there vacant and unmoving, as if frozen in time, their bodies present but their minds somewhere far away. Unease prickled at her, but she moved on, forcing herself to smile at the next row, trying to shake off the chill that crept up her spine. In 21C, a young man sat rigid, hands on knees, staring forward. His knuckles were white, his breathing shallow, as if he was bracing for something unseen. Again, no reaction to her offer. He didn't even seem to notice her, his gaze locked on the seat back in front of him. It wasn't rudeness or sleep. It was an unnatural absence, a hollowness that seemed to radiate from these passengers, as if something essential had been drained away. Molly tried to dismiss it. Night flights had tired passengers and sometimes people just wanted to be left alone, but this was different. The silence around them felt heavy, almost oppressive. She counted about a dozen like them, scattered through the cabin, each one isolated in their own bubble of stillness, untouched by the world around them. They didn't look at each other or shift in their seats. There was no sign of recognition, no shared glances, just a collective, eerie detachment. They were statues among the living, present in body but absent in spirit, as if they'd been left behind by the rest of the world. The rest of the cabin was lost in books, movies, or sleep, blissfully unaware of the strange tableau unfolding in their midst. But these silent figures were a growing anomaly, their presence impossible to ignore now that Molly had noticed them. Molly's mind raced. Who were they? Why were they like this? Was it some kind of medical episode, or something far stranger? She felt her own heartbeat quicken, her grip tightening on the cart as she tried to steady herself, searching for a logical explanation. The routine flight was starting to feel anything but routine. The air seemed charged with a quiet tension, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. The question lingered. What was really happening on Flight 417? And as Molly continued down the aisle, she couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was far more unsettling than she could imagine. Molly retreated to the galley unsettled. The hum of the engines felt louder here, echoing in the cramped space, amplifying her nerves. She tried to steady her breathing, but the unease clung to her like a second skin. She found David, her colleague, tidying up, methodically stacking cups and napkins as if routine could ward off the strange tension in the air. "Did you notice anything strange?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the drone of the plane. She glanced over her shoulder, as if afraid the walls themselves might be listening. David shrugged, forcing a casual smile. "Just the usual. Grumpy passengers, peanut guy." He tried to sound light, but his eyes darted nervously. Molly hesitated, then confided, "Some passengers, rows 15, 21, 28, they just sit there, no reaction, not even breathing." Her words hung in the air, heavy and strange. David laughed nervously. "They're probably just deep sleepers, like zombies." He tried to brush it off, but the joke fell flat, the word zombies echoing between them. The word lingered. Uncomfortably, apartment Molly shivered, suddenly aware of how cold the galley felt, how the fluorescent lights flickered just a little too much. Molly needed to see for herself. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the night was hiding secrets just out of sight. She walked the aisle, collecting trash, observing the silent ones. Each step felt heavier, her senses sharpened by anxiety. She tried to act normal, but her eyes kept darting to the unmoving passengers. In row 15, the couple's hands were folded, posture perfect, chests unmoving. Their faces were expressionless, as if frozen in time. The young man in 21C hadn't shifted. His eyes were open, staring straight ahead, unblinking. The woman in 28 was just as vacant. Her hands rested limply in her lap, her gaze fixed on nothing. No bags, no blankets, just stillness. It was as if these passengers had been placed here, props in a scene that no longer made sense. The other passengers were oblivious, lost in their own worlds, reading, sleeping, headphones on, unaware of the silent tableau around them. Only Molly seemed to notice this silent congregation. The isolation pressed in, making her feel like the last person awake in a world gone still. Her curiosity curdled into genuine unease. Every instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong, but she couldn't explain why. Something was profoundly wrong on Flight 417. The air felt heavier, the silence deeper, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. The normalcy of the night was slipping away, replaced by a creeping dread that seemed to seep from the shadows. Molly's sense of reality was beginning to fracture, her mind racing with questions she was afraid to answer. An hour passed in darkness. Molly couldn't rest, the image of the silent passengers haunting her. She tried again, approaching the couple in row 15. "Can I get you a blanket or pillow?" she asked softly. The woman's eyes stayed fixed ahead, unblinking. It was like talking to mannequins. Molly felt a chill. This wasn't just being ignored, it was as if they couldn't hear or see her. She tried the young man in 21C. "Sir, are you alright? Please nod if you hear me." Nothing. No blink, no movement. Around them, other passengers slept naturally, but these figures were locked in absolute stillness. Defeated, Molly returned to the galley. The silence felt heavy, almost sentient. These passengers weren't sleeping or meditating, they were something else, something she couldn't name. The sense of being watched lingered, even as no one turned their head. Suddenly, turbulence shook the plane, jolting everyone awake. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged and the captain's voice urged everyone to buckle up. Passengers gasped, gripping armrests. Molly moved through the cabin, reassuring everyone. Her eyes darted to the silent passengers. Surely this would get a reaction. The plane dropped, items rattled, a woman gasped, but the silent ones didn't flinch. Their bodies moved only with the plane like inanimate objects. No hands gripped seats, no heads turned. Their stares remained unbroken. The turbulence subsided and relief swept the cabin. But Molly's fear deepened. The turbulence had been a test, and they'd failed it. These people were impervious, disconnected from reality. They were present but not truly there. After the turbulence, a baby's wail pierced the air. The mother tried to soothe him, passengers shifted, some donned headphones. Molly watched the silent couple in row 15 just feet from the crying child. No reaction, no glance, no frown, nothing. The primal sound of a baby's cry usually elicits some response, but the silent ones were untouched, as if deaf to the world. Molly checked the others, the young man in 21C, the woman in 28. None reacted. The crying continued, but these figures remained islands, sealed off from the noise. Finally, the baby quieted, calm returned. But for Molly, the evidence was clear. These passengers weren't just ignoring the world, they were sealed off from it. They were like ghosts, visible but intangible. The mystery was only deepening. The hours crept by, most of the cabin asleep. Molly sat in the rear galley, dread heavy in her stomach. On the other side of the curtain, the silent ones sat among the sleeping. She replayed every moment, boarding, takeoff, her first interactions. Had she missed something? They'd blended in perfectly, tickets, seat assignments, security. On paper, they were normal. But their behavior was a rejection of normality. David snored softly nearby, a reminder of the ordinary world. Molly felt utterly alone with her discovery. Who could she tell? What could she prove? No evidence, just a collection of unnerving observations. She needed something tangible. The passenger manifest. Maybe it held answers. With a deep breath, she stood up, heart pounding. She had to see that list. Molly accessed the flight manifest on a tablet in the crew area. The list of names appeared, 184 passengers. She scrolled to row 15. No names. The row missing. Her stomach dropped. The seats were occupied, but the manifest showed them as empty. She checked 21C, blank. Row 28, seat D, blank. Each silent passenger's seat was listed as unoccupied, 12 in total, physically present, but not on the record. No names, no identities. They were phantoms, occupying seats meant to be vacant. The dread solidified into terror. These weren't just strange passengers, they were impossible passengers. They'd boarded a secure aircraft without a trace. Not on the list, not supposed to be here. The mystery had become infinitely deeper. Molly's hands shook as she clutched the tablet. The rules of reality had been broken. She was alone with a secret no one would believe. The impossible was sitting right in front of her. Molly stood frozen in the galley, the tablet glowing in her hands. 12 people on her flight did not exist. They were invisible to every system, yet present in the flesh. How did they get here? Every protocol should have stopped them. Yet here they were, a dozen ghosts among the living. She peeked through the curtain, spotting their silhouettes, unmoving, silent. They were holes in the world, patches of nothingness shaped like people. The rest of the passengers slept, unaware. Molly felt utterly isolated, the sole witness to this impossible invasion. As dawn crept in, Flight 417 began its descent. The journey was ending, but the questions were just beginning. Would these passengers vanish into the crowd or remain forever unaccounted for? Molly was no longer just a flight attendant. She was the keeper of a terrifying secret, a witness to the mysterious passengers of Flight 417. The airplane lurched, hard. It was the kind of jolt that yanks you out of your thoughts and slams you into the present. A violent reminder that you're thousands of feet above the earth, at the mercy of the sky. My soda shot up, the cup smacking the ceiling before crashing to the floor. The liquid arced through the air, droplets catching the overhead lights for a split second before splattering across my tray table and jeans. My heart hammered, thudding so loudly I could almost hear it over the chaos. Outside, only storm clouds and darkness. The world beyond the window was a swirling void, the kind of black that swallows everything. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the clouds in brief, ghostly flashes. The seatbelt sign glowed, suddenly more like a lifeline than a warning. Its steady light was the only thing that felt certain, a small beacon in the chaos. I gripped the armrests, knuckles white. My fingers dug into the worn fabric, desperate for something solid, something real. A scream cut through the cabin. Somewhere, a baby wailed. The sound was raw, primal, fear made audible. People gasped, voices rising in confusion and panic. Flight attendants, once calm, now strapped in, faces pale. Their practiced smiles were gone, replaced by tight jaws and darting eyes. Even they looked scared, and that terrified me more than anything. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Experiencing some turbulence. Please remain seated." The words were clipped, broken by static and nerves. His voice was strained, not reassuring. There was a tremor there, a hesitation that made my stomach drop even further. The plane dropped again, harder. It felt like falling. My stomach lurched into my throat, and for a split second, gravity seemed to vanish. This wasn't just turbulence, something was wrong. The air felt charged, electric, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing to be anywhere else. I tried to picture solid ground, the comfort of home, but all I could feel was the relentless shaking. But you can't wish away a falling airplane. The sensation of descent was unmistakable, a sickening drop that made my insides twist. Overhead bins rattled violently, a few popping open to spill bags and jackets into the aisle. Oxygen masks trembled in their compartments, threatening to drop at any moment. The metal groaned, every bolt protesting. The whole plane seemed to shudder, as if it might come apart at the seams. I opened my eyes. Faces around me were pale, some praying, others frozen in terror. A man clutched a rosary, lips moving in silent prayer. A woman stared straight ahead, tears streaming down her cheeks. The air was thick with dread. It pressed down on us, heavy and suffocating, as if the cabin itself was shrinking. Then, as suddenly as it began, the shaking stopped. The plane leveled out. For a moment, no one moved, as if we were afraid to break the fragile calm. A shaky sigh of relief rippled through the cabin. People exhaled, some laughing nervously, others wiping sweat from their brows. But the silence that followed was worse, unnatural, heavy. It was as if the entire plane was holding its breath, waiting for the next disaster. The baby stopped crying. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the engines and the occasional sniffle. We sat, suspended in darkness, waiting. Every second stretched, the minutes dragging on as we wondered what would happen next. That's when I saw her. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, a side effect of adrenaline and fear. A woman, standing in the aisle, even though the seatbelt sign still glowed. She seemed untouched by the chaos, perfectly still amid the aftermath. She wore a white dress, old-fashioned, her hair pinned up, strands floating as if underwater. The fabric shimmered faintly, as if lit from within. Her skin was chalk pale, almost glowing. She looked impossibly out of place, like a figure from another era or another world. She stared ahead, unmoving, as if she saw something none of us could. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on a point far beyond the cabin walls. No one else seemed to notice her. I looked around, searching for any sign that someone else saw what I did, but everyone was lost in their own fear, their own relief. And she didn't belong on this flight. In that moment, I knew something stranger than turbulence had just entered our lives. She stood in the aisle, perfectly still, as if she had always belonged to the shadows between the seats. The hush that fell over the cabin was unnatural, thick and heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Her white dress glowed faintly in the dim light, the fabric shimmering with an otherworldly sheen that seemed to draw every eye. It was as if she was lit from within, a pale beacon in the gloom, untouched by the flickering overhead lights. Her eyes were fixed on the front of the plane, unblinking, wide and glassy, as if she was seeing something none of us could. There was a strange intensity in her gaze, a focus that made it impossible to look away. She didn't seem to notice the chaos we'd just survived, the turbulence that had sent drinks flying and passengers clutching their armrests. While everyone else was still catching their breath, she stood untouched, as if the storm had never happened. Then she spoke, her voice slicing through the silence. "It's not safe." The words were flat, emotionless, just a fact, delivered with chilling certainty. It was as if she was reciting a warning she'd given 1,000 times before. A man tried to reason with her, his voice trembling as he asked if she needed help, but she didn't respond, didn't even blink. She seemed completely disconnected from the world around her, as if she existed on a different plane. "It's not safe," she repeated, like a broken record, her tone never changing. The repetition sent chills down my spine, each word echoing in the silent cabin, growing heavier with every utterance. Her form seemed to blur at the edges, almost transparent, as if she was fading in and out of existence. For a moment I wondered if she was even real, or just a trick of the light and our collective fear. I could see the seats through her dress, the outlines of the upholstery faintly visible where her body should have been. She wasn't a passenger, at least not in any way that made sense. She wasn't a flight attendant either. There was no name tag, no uniform, nothing to tie her to the world we knew. She was something else entirely, something that didn't belong here. The other passengers began to notice, whispers rippling through the cabin like a cold draft. Heads turned, eyes widened, and a new kind of fear began to spread, one that had nothing to do with turbulence or storms. "Who is that? Why is she standing?" people whispered, their voices barely more than a breath. Confusion and dread mingled in the air, thickening the tension with every passing second. Fear shifted, no longer about the storm but about her. The anxiety that had gripped us moments before was replaced by something colder, more primal, a fear of the unknown. Her head turned, mechanically, to the window, as if drawn by some invisible force. The movement was unnatural, almost robotic, and it sent a fresh wave of unease through the cabin. Her eyes were bottomless, filled with endless sadness, a sorrow so deep it seemed to swallow the light. It was as if she carried the weight of countless tragedies, all reflected in her haunted gaze. The calm after the turbulence was gone, replaced by a colder, stranger fear. The temperature seemed to drop, and every breath felt heavier, as if the air itself was warning us to pay attention. She repeated, "It's not safe." The words hung in the air, more powerful than any alarm or announcement, and for a moment time seemed to stop, and we all knew she was right. In that instant, every passenger understood. Whatever she was, whatever she meant, her warning was not to be ignored. The fear that filled the cabin was no longer just about her presence, but about what might come next. Whispers erupted into shouts. "She's a ghost! Look, you can see through her!" Panic swept the cabin. People screamed, pressed call buttons, but no flight attendants came. The orderly rows dissolved into chaos. Phones came out, shaky hands trying to record the impossible. It was a modern reaction to ancient terror. If you see a ghost, film it. I was frozen, eyes locked on the woman in white. She stood untouched by the chaos, in her own world. Her calm made the fear worse. We were trapped, thousands of feet up, with a storm inside and a ghost at its center. The panic was alive, and it was spreading. Then, others began to rise. At first it was just a few, shapes shifting in the gloom, barely more than shadows. But soon the movement spread, rippling through the cabin like a silent wave. The air felt charged, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. A man in an old suit, his features pale and blurred, as if he'd stepped out of a faded photograph. A woman in a vintage hat, her eyes hollow, her dress whispering of another era. A little boy with a teddy bear clutched tight, his small face frozen in a look of longing. They stood, passing through seatbelts like mist, their forms flickering in and out of focus, as if the rules of the living world no longer applied. Dozens of them, phantom passengers, glowing faintly, their clothes a patchwork of decades. Some wore uniforms from wars long past, others the casual dress of more recent times, each one a memory, a story left unfinished. They filled the aisles, silent and still, their presence pressing in from all sides. The space between seats seemed to shrink, the air thick with the weight of so many unspoken words. The living fell silent, terror struck. Every breath was shallow, every heartbeat thundered in the hush. No one dared to move. Suddenly their eyes ignited, fiery orange burning in the darkness. The glow was unnatural, casting an eerie light that seemed to pierce right through you. Every ghost stared at the cockpit door, as if waiting for something, or someone to appear. The orange glow cast hellish shadows across the cabin, twisting the familiar into something monstrous. Faces became masks, and every corner seemed to crawl with darkness. The air turned icy cold. You could see your breath, swirling in the unnatural chill, as if the plane had been plunged into another world. Their unified movement was unnatural, coordinated, purposeful. They moved as one, a single will guiding them, their steps echoing in perfect, dreadful harmony. They were a silent army, their eyes their weapons. The force of their gaze was almost physical, pinning us to our seats. The fear was now a suffocating dread, thick as fog. It pressed against your chest, made your hands tremble, your mind race with questions you dared not ask. We, the living, were outnumbered. The dead surrounded us, their ranks growing with every heartbeat, their presence undeniable. We were intruders on their flight, trespassers in a realm that was never meant for us. The realization settled in, cold and absolute, and they were all waiting, staring forward, as if for a signal. The anticipation was unbearable, a tension that stretched thinner with every second. The living and the dead, divided by a line of burning eyes. It was a boundary no one dared cross, a warning written in fire. The cabin was no longer ours. The world we knew had slipped away, replaced by something ancient and hungry. We were just along for the ride, powerless, swept up in a journey that belonged to the dead. All we could do was wait, and hope the dawn would come. The lights flickered, plunging us into darkness, broken only by the phantom's burning eyes. In the strobe-like flashes, the cabin became a nightmare. Suddenly, oxygen masks dropped, swaying on yellow tubes. No alarms, no captain's voice, just chaos. Some grabbed for masks, most just stared. The teenager with the phone filmed everything, whispering, "You guys won't believe this." The scene was overwhelming. Flickering lights, dangling masks, silent ghosts. My mind reeled. Was this a crash, a haunting, or both? The line between mechanical failure and the supernatural blurred. We were trapped in a symphony of fear. Every new event was another note in the orchestra. The ghosts stood motionless, eyes burning. The terror was total. The teenager's phone became our only window to the front. He zoomed in on the cockpit door, trying to capture what the phantom saw. Suddenly his screen glitched, then changed. It showed the cockpit engulfed in flames, smoke billowing, windows glowing orange. He gasped, dropping the phone. The image stayed, frozen, a burning cockpit. Passengers stared, horrified. The image was a prophecy, a vision of our end. The phantoms weren't just haunting us, they were showing us. They were reliving their own final moments, and we were trapped with them. The phone's screen glowed like a portal to hell. The silence grew heavier, filled with the knowledge of what was coming. The flickering lights, the masks, the ghosts. It all made sense now. The frozen image was a warning, but it was already too late. The phantom's eyes never left the cockpit. We were witnessing their last moments, and maybe our own. Then came the smell, faint at first, then unmistakable. Burning plastic, electrical fire. It clawed at my throat, made my eyes water. People coughed, eyes wide with terror. The smell was real. Disaster was here. I pulled my shirt over my nose, useless against the smoke. The air grew hot, thick. The phantoms didn't react. They stood, eyes burning, untouched by the smoke. The main lights died. Emergency floor lights glowed red, casting a bloody hue. The cabin became a red-lit cavern of smoke and ghosts. No alarms, no instructions, just silence and fear. The normal rules no longer applied. We were in their world now, and in their world, You burn in silence. The smoke thickened, swirling in the red light. Heat radiated from the front, the cockpit where the phone had shown us fire. We couldn't see flames, but we could feel them. Panic faded into quiet, desperate survival. People pulled on oxygen masks, hoping to filter the smoke. We became a sea of masked, terrified faces. The cabin was hell-red light, thick smoke, silent ghosts with burning eyes. The plane felt like it was descending into an underworld. The phantoms were our guides, or our jailers. They were at peace with the destruction. We were not. The cockpit was silent. No one was in charge. We were alone, trapped with ghosts. The fear was now a heavy weight. The frozen phone screen had shown us our fate. We weren't just in danger, we were doomed. Time stretched, every second thick with dread. The smoke poured in, heat rising. The phantom's eyes burned brighter, fixed on the cockpit. They waited for the finale, the moment flames would consume us. Who were they? Victims of a past crash? Were we doomed to join them? We were the new cast in an old tragedy, forced to play out the final scene. Fear was all that remained. In the air, in our masked faces, in the ghost's steady gaze. There was no escape. We were trapped, miles above the earth, in a haunted, burning cage. The world outside was in different darkness. The plane flew on, a ghost ship in the night. The engines hummed, the soundtrack to our final journey. The woman in white had been right. It wasn't safe. And as the smoke swirled, I knew we had all become phantom passengers on flight 417. The night of July 18th, 2025 was clear. The night of July 18th, 2025 was clear. The night of July 18th, 2025 was clear. Flight 417 cruised high above the American heartland, a routine red-eye with most passengers asleep. In the cockpit, Captain Eva Rostova and her first officer monitored the instruments. Everything normal, autopilot engaged, engines steady. Yet a strange unease crept in. The air felt heavy, charged, as if something unseen pressed down on the cabin. Rostova exchanged a glance with her co-pilot. He felt it too. The feeling wasn't from any warning light or system error. It was instinct, a pilot's sixth sense. In the cabin, Senior Flight Attendant Liam noticed the same oppressive stillness. The air was colder than usual, with icy pockets that defied the climate controls. Liam shivered, pulling his jacket tighter, unsettled by the unnatural quiet. The silence felt watchful, as if the plane itself was holding its breath. He paused by the rear galley, peering out at the endless darkness and blinking wing light. Everything looked normal, but the sense of dread grew. The flight was only halfway to its destination, hours left in this metal tube. Liam couldn't shake the cold knot in his stomach. The crew and passengers were trapped together in a strange, oppressive calm. No one knew it yet, but this was only the beginning. Something was wrong, something that would defy all logic and reason. The first signs of trouble had arrived, silent and unseen. The unease soon demanded action. Captain Rostova requested a mid-flight passenger count, unusual but necessary. Liam and Maria, the attendants, moved through the dark cabin, clickers in hand. Each click marked a sole business travelers, families, students. At the center, they compared numbers, 64 from the back, 63 from the front. The numbers didn't match. They tried again, swapping sections. The result, 127 passengers. Liam's heart pounded. He remembered the manifest, 74, not 127. He checked the official list. 74 names confirmed before takeoff. A chilling gap of 53 people separated reality from their count. Liam and Maria stared at their clickers, pale and shaken. "That can't be right," Maria whispered. The manifest was clear. The numbers were impossible. The cabin felt heavier, haunted by an inexplicable presence. The crew realized this was no ordinary flight. The discrepancy was real and terrifying. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. 53 extra souls, unaccounted for. The mystery was no longer just a feeling. The crew was facing something they could not explain. The dread was only beginning. Liam called the cockpit, voice tight with fear. "Captain, we have a serious discrepancy." He explained the head counts and the manifest. Captain Rostova felt a jolt. This was no longer just a feeling. 53 people couldn't appear out of thin air. She ordered a direct call to airline operations. The night manager at the departure airport listened, confused. Rostova requested a review of all records, gate scans, ticket sales, security footage. The ground crew checked everything. 74 passengers, confirmed at every step. Security footage showed 74 people boarding, no more, no less. The ground manager relayed the findings. "You have 74 passengers on board, 7-4. In the cockpit, the words hung heavy. The evidence on the ground was irrefutable, but the evidence in the cabin, the living, breathing count, was just as real. The 53 extra people were not a clerical error. They were there, with no record of ever existing. The paradox deepened. The crew was trapped between two realities. The mystery was now undeniable. The impossible had become their new normal. The flight was no longer routine. The crew faced a terrifying, unsolvable riddle. The night pressed in, colder than ever. The truth was more chilling than any storm. Captain Rostova gave Liam a new order. Walk the cabin again, discreetly engage with passengers, look for anyone out of place. Liam and Maria moved through the rows, offering water and blankets, eyes scanning for anomalies. The cabin was still unnaturally cold, the silence deeper than before. They found some passengers completely unresponsive, a man in 14C, a woman by the window. Their eyes were open, staring blankly, skin ice cold to the touch. Panic clawed at Liam, but he pressed on. Maria found more clusters of silent, cold passengers scattered throughout the cabin. They were not sleeping, not sick, something else entirely. Liam and Maria met in the galley, faces ashen. No words were needed. They'd both seen the impossible. The cold, silent passengers were the source of the cabin's oppressive weight. They were the 53 phantom travelers, occupying seats yet utterly devoid of life. The crew was no longer dealing with numbers. They were trapped with dozens of ghosts at 30,000 feet. The reality was undeniable. The living and the dead shared the same space. The mystery had become a haunting. The crew's fear was now absolute. The flight had crossed into the unknown. Liam relayed the chilling details to Captain Rostova. She acted fast, securing the cockpit and ordering Liam and Maria to stay in the forward galley. "Do not engage with any more of them," she commanded. The cockpit door locked with a heavy thud. Rostova felt a flicker of fear. This was no mechanical failure, but something far worse. Alone above the Rockies, she needed a plan. The only solid information, the manifest of 74 names. She ordered her co-pilot to display the list and prepare for a full name verification. "We're going to call out every name. Liam and Maria will confirm each one." The idea was desperate, unprecedented, but necessary. Rostova's voice over the intercom was steady. "You'll walk the aisle, I'll read each name, confirm their presence." The plan was set. The cockpit became a fortress. The investigation into the ghostly passengers was about to begin. The crew braced for what they might discover. The line between the living and the dead was about to be drawn. The flight's fate hung in the balance. The search for answers had begun. The unknown pressed in from every side. The name check began. Captain Rostova read names over the PA. Liam and Maria moved through the cabin, confirming each living passenger. For every confirmed name, there were others, cold, silent, absent from the manifest. The cold ones sat patiently, their presence undeniable. Liam and Maria avoided their vacant stares, feeling the chill radiate from their seats. In the cockpit, the first officer had an idea: run the names of the unlisted passengers. Liam spotted a wallet on one of the cold passengers and read the name, David McMillan. The first officer searched the name. David McMillan had died in 1984 in the crash of Eastern Airlines Flight 417. The same flight number, the same airline. Rostova asked for more names. Liam and Maria searched for IDs, monogrammed items, anything. Each name they found matched a victim from the 1984 crash. All 53 cold passengers were on that manifest. The realization hit: the ghosts of Flight 417's past were on board. The oppressive cold, the silence, the stares, it all made sense. The living and the dead were sharing the same flight. The crew was flying with the victims of a disaster from 41 years ago. The supernatural had become reality. The mystery was solved, but the terror remained. The crew's fear deepened. The past and present had collided at 30,000 feet. The flight was now a tomb in the sky. The cockpit was silent as the truth settled in. The ghostly passengers were victims of the 1984 crash. Eastern Airlines Flight 417. No survivors, all lost in the Rockies. Now their spirits filled the cabin of the new Flight 417, flying the same route. The crew cross-checked names, each matching the old manifest. The realization was crushing. They were flying with the dead. The oppressive cold, the silence, the stares, all made sense now. The living and the dead were trapped together, reliving a tragedy. The crew's fear shifted from the unknown to the known. They wondered, were they doomed to repeat history? Was this a warning, or were the ghosts here to claim more lives? The plane became a tomb, suspended between past and present. The crew's only hope was to survive the night. The question of fate hung over everyone. The tragedy of Flight 417 was reborn at 30,000 feet. Outside, the Rocky Mountains loomed, black and unforgiving. No city lights, no safe landing, just endless wilderness below. The crew was isolated, a fragile bubble of life and death in the night sky. Inside, anxiety spread among the living passengers. The cold, silent ghosts remained impassive, their presence chilling. Captain Rostova and her first officer clung to routine, scanning instruments for any sign of danger. Every bump of turbulence sent a wave of fear through the cockpit. The hours dragged on, each minute a victory against the unknown. The crew spoke little, existing in silent awareness. They were the main characters in a ghost story, desperate to reach dawn. Their only goal: keep the plane flying, get the living to safety. They pressed on, hoping for salvation with the sunrise. As dawn broke, the oppressive cold faded. Liam walked the aisle. Every ghostly seat was empty. The 53 were gone, leaving only memories. The plane landed safely, the living disembarked, unaware of the night's terror. The investigation found nothing, no evidence, no explanation. The crew's story became aviation legend, whispered among pilots. Flight 417 joined the ranks of unsolved mysteries. These stories remind us that the sky remains a place of immense mystery. For all our knowledge, some questions have no answers. Did the ghosts of 1984 truly ride Flight 417 that night? Was it a warning, a memorial, or a tear in reality? We may never know. On July 18, 2025, Portland's skies were a flawless blue, the kind of morning that promised nothing but routine. The city below bustled with its usual rhythm, unaware that something extraordinary was about to unfold above. High above, Flight 417, a Boeing 737 inbound from Denver, began its descent, gliding smoothly through the calm air as it lined up for its final approach to Portland International Airport. The landing itself was textbook. The wheels kissed the tarmac with barely a jolt. The engines roared in reverse and the aircraft slowed to a gentle roll. For the pilots, it was just another day at work, a flawless, routine, almost forgettable arrival. In the control tower, air traffic controllers exchanged nods of approval, their voices calm and steady, as they guided other flights in and out. On the ground, crews moved with practiced efficiency, guiding the 737 to its assigned gate with glowing batons. Inside the cabin, passengers unbuckled their seatbelts, stretching limbs stiff from the journey. Some chatted about their plans, others checked their phones, eager to reunite with family or make their next connection. The mood was light, filled with the relief and anticipation that always follows a safe landing. The terminal buzzed with the familiar energy of arrivals. Families pressed against the glass, children waving, business travelers already lost in their screens. Laughter and greetings echoed through the halls. Everything seemed perfectly normal, just another day at the airport. But beneath this surface calm, a subtle tension lingered. A few airport staff exchanged uncertain glances, as if sensing something was off, though no one could quite put their finger on it. The arrival of Flight 417, so ordinary on the outside, would soon become the center of a mystery that defied all logic and explanation. Whispers began to circulate among the ground crew as they noticed small, inexplicable details, things that didn't quite add up. The jet bridge extended, the doors opened, and the crew greeted passengers with practiced smiles. The first travelers stepped into the terminal, unaware that their journey was about to take a strange turn. No one showed any sign of distress. There were no outward clues to the bizarre events that had quietly unfolded at 30,000 feet. To the casual observer, it was just another successful flight. The scene was deceptively ordinary, a calm before a storm of confusion. The airport's bright lights and polished floors masked the uncertainty that was about to ripple through its corridors. Ground staff continued their routines, unloading luggage, refueling, and preparing for the next flight. In the cockpit, the pilots completed their post-flight paperwork, exchanging a few words about the smooth landing before gathering their things. Outside, the Boeing 737 sat quietly at the gate, its fuselage gleaming under the night sky. The airport's exterior seemed peaceful, but inside questions were beginning to form. Passengers filtered out into the night, some pausing to check their surroundings, others hurrying to waiting cars or taxis. For most, it was just another journey's end. But for a few, a sense of unease lingered, as if they'd left something important behind. The perfect landing, it turned out, was only the first act in a story that would soon grip the entire airport, and beyond. What had seemed like a routine arrival was about to unravel in ways no one could have predicted. No one, neither crew nor passengers, could have imagined what was coming next. The events that would follow would challenge everything they thought they knew about air travel, and about reality itself. The mystery of Flight 417 had just begun, and its perfect landing was only the beginning of a story that would haunt Portland for years to come. The first sign of trouble came quietly, almost unnoticed, with the passenger count. What should have been a routine disembarkation quickly turned into a logistical nightmare. The manifest was clear: 131 passengers and 6 crew had boarded Flight 417. But as the minutes ticked by, only 74 people stepped off the plane, their faces weary from the journey, unaware of the chaos about to unfold. Airline staff checked and rechecked the lists, calling out names, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Still, 57 passengers and all 6 crew members were unaccounted for, gone without a trace. Beneath the surface, panic simmered. Security was summoned, their radios crackling with urgency as they rushed to the scene, bracing for the unknown. The cabin crew, visibly shaken, insisted the plane was empty. They'd performed their final sweep, checking every seat, every overhead bin, every shadowed corner. Security teams methodically searched the aircraft, opening closets, peering into lavatories, even crawling beneath seats. Not a single clue was found. There were no signs of struggle, no abandoned luggage, not even a forgotten jacket or a stray boarding pass. It was as if the missing had simply evaporated. The missing had vanished somewhere between takeoff and landing, leaving behind only questions and a chilling silence. Survivors, now held in a secure area, were as baffled as the authorities. Their confusion was palpable, their voices hushed as they tried to make sense of the impossible. Each remembered a full flight, the bustle of boarding, the hum of conversation. Yet none could explain the disappearances, or recall anything unusual during the journey. News of the incident spread like wildfire. How could nearly 60 people simply disappear from a sealed aircraft, mid-flight, with no warning and no trace? The doors had remained locked from the moment the plane left the gate until it docked. No one could have entered or exited unnoticed. With every passing minute, the mystery deepened. Time seemed to slow as investigators scrambled for answers. Relief at a safe landing quickly gave way to dread and disbelief. The joy of arrival was replaced by a sense of unreality. Flight 417 was now a crime scene, cordoned off and crawling with investigators. It was a puzzle with no solution, a riddle that defied logic. The vanishing act was complete. The plane sat alone on the tarmac, shrouded in fog and mystery. For those left behind, the real horror was just beginning. Fear and uncertainty gripped everyone who had witnessed the impossible. No one could explain what had happened. Theories swirled, but none made sense. The impossible had become reality. The world was about to demand answers, but for now, all anyone had was fear, confusion, and a mystery that would haunt the night. Investigators from the NTSB and FBI descended on Flight 417, now quarantined in a secure hangar. Forensic teams expected evidence, fingerprints, fibers, personal items, but found almost nothing. The seats where the missing had sat were not just clean, but sterile, as if no one had ever been there. Infrared scans showed no residual body heat. The seats were stone cold. It defied logic and physics. Survivors recalled neighbors reading books or chatting, but both people and belongings had vanished. The plane felt like a ghost ship. Systems normal, but the atmosphere unnaturally empty. Even the survivors' hand luggage showed no trace of the missing. The absence of evidence was the most chilling clue. It pointed to something beyond human understanding. The investigators were left with only questions. The aircraft was flawless, but its emptiness was terrifying. Flight 417 had become a riddle with no earthly answer. The cockpit voice recorder should have held the crew's final conversations. Instead, it played back only a steady, rhythmic static. The device was in perfect working order. There was no technical fault. Audio analysts filtered the static, uncovering faint, distorted voices. The whispers were fragmented, pleading, and not from the missing crew. "They're not here," one voice seemed to say. "It's happening again," whispered another. The recording was too strange to release publicly, but it chilled everyone who heard it. It was as if the recorder had captured echoes from another place, or another time. Combined with the sterile cabin and missing people, the evidence pointed to something supernatural. The authorities were stumped. The static became the sound of the mystery itself. The FBI took control, locking down the airport and sealing off the plane. Survivors were sequestered, their phones confiscated, and communication cut off. They were questioned for days, but their stories never changed. The flight was full, then suddenly it wasn't. The aircraft became a black box, off-limits, guarded and dismantled piece by piece. Rumors of hazmat suits and secret technology swirled among airport staff. The official story was vague, fueling public speculation and conspiracy theories. Was it terrorism, a chemical agent, or something stranger? Behind the scenes, authorities were lost. Every lead deepened the enigma. Survivors were placed under long-term surveillance after release. The government's response was a mix of control and desperation. The mystery only grew. The world demanded answers, but none were forthcoming. Flight 417 was now a national secret. The truth was buried deeper with every passing day. Weeks later, survivors were released, warned to stay silent. Then, the deaths began. The first survivor died of a sudden heart attack. The next, a freak car accident. An investigative journalist noticed a terrifying pattern. The order of deaths matched the victim list from the 1984 crash of Horizon Air Flight 417. Each survivor died in the same sequence as the victims from that decades-old disaster. The survivors were living on borrowed time, their fates linked to the ghosts of the past. The revelation sent shockwaves through the group. They could count down the days until their turn. The FBI was powerless to intervene. The pattern was too perfect to be chance, too supernatural to prevent. The survivors were trapped in a macabre countdown. Their lives were ticking away in sync with a 40-year-old tragedy. The curse was unfolding, one life at a time. For the remaining survivors, life became a nightmare of waiting. They were marked for death by a schedule they couldn't change. Some tried to flee, but fate always found them. The community fractured, some hid, others turned to religion or the occult. A few took their own lives, desperate to control their fate. Surveillance teams could only watch as paranoia and despair took hold. Imagine knowing you're next. Every sound, every shadow a possible omen. Relationships crumbled, careers ended. Their lives belonged to the pattern, to the ghost of a flight that crashed before they were born. Authorities were helpless, counseling and protection meant nothing. The survivors' burden was solitary and inescapable. Their slow, methodical demise was the final act of the mystery. With no rational explanation, theories turned speculative. The official reports offered little comfort, and the families of the missing were left to grasp at shadows. In the absence of answers, the story of Flight 417 became a breeding ground for rumors and whispered legends. Some believed in a curse. Flight 417 had inherited the trauma of the 1984 crash, becoming a vessel for unresolved deaths. The idea of a curse was not new, but here it felt chillingly plausible. The air around the airport seemed heavy, as if the past itself lingered, refusing to let go. The missing were consumed by the energy of the past. The survivors were placeholders, doomed to complete the death toll. Each empty seat was a silent reminder, a gap that could never be filled. The survivors, haunted by guilt and confusion, wondered if they had truly escaped, or if they were simply waiting for their turn. Others proposed a temporal anomaly, an impossible overlap in time. For a few hours, Flight 417 merged with its 1984 counterpart, passengers coexisting in two timelines, their destinies intertwined. The boundaries between past and present blurred, and reality itself seemed to fracture. The missing were swapped, sent back to perish in 1984. The survivors remained, but their fates were now out of sync with reality. Some claimed to remember flashes of another era, strange uniforms, unfamiliar faces, a sense of déjà vu that lingered long after landing. The sterile seats, the whispers, the deaths, all pointed to a supernatural event. It was as if the plane itself had become a liminal space, a vessel drifting between worlds carrying echoes of tragedy and loss. The universe, it seemed, was correcting a paradox. Some force beyond comprehension was balancing the scales, ensuring that the past would not be forgotten, nor its debts left unpaid. Whether curse or loop, both theories led to the same conclusion. The line between fate and coincidence had vanished, leaving only questions that no one could answer. The passengers had brushed against something beyond understanding. Their lives, and the lives of those lost, were now forever linked by a moment that defied explanation. Flight 417 was not just a tragedy but a haunting. Its story lingered in the minds of all who heard it, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. The mystery defied every law we know, leaving only silence, and the uneasy sense that the past is never truly gone. Today, Flight 417 sits sealed in a government hangar, a monument to an unsolved mystery. The final survivor died, completing the grim manifest of the 1984 crash. The official investigation was closed, its findings classified. All that remains are files, theories, and chilling questions. Was it a curse, a temporal glitch, or something stranger? The story of Flight 417